Before you can tell people that you speak advanced C2 English, you need to know and use all of these. If you look through this list and you see some features of English which you are either not confident with or you don't know about, then this video is made for you. I'm going to go through 30 common features of the most advanced English. The features which C2 English, native level English speakers will know and use. And they cover all of the grammar terms that you can see on this list here. Number 30. Verbs with meaning shifts. Some verbs are followed by another verb with ing. Other verbs are followed by to and then another verb. But then there's another category of verbs that can be followed by either the ing form or to followed by the verb. And remember is one of those verbs. Look at the two sentences. I remembered seeing him a long time ago. I must remember to call him. Notice in the first sentence, remembered is followed by a verb with ing. In the second sentence, remember is followed by to, followed by the verb infinitive. And this leads to a change in meaning. Verb plus ing here means it happens before remembering. I remembered seeing him a long time ago means I remembered seeing him before now. To plus the verb, though, means remember, then it happens. I must remember to call him means I must remember and then call him after. Also, there are verbs that can have a state form or an active form, and that leads to a shift in the meaning there. For example, I have a phone in my pocket. I'm having a great time. Here, the state form, I have, means possession. The phone is mine. But I'm having a great time means an experience. Verbs can also have meaning shifts if they are what we call ergative. For example, run. I ran to the train station. I run a shop in the city. Here, the verb run has a different meaning depending on what comes after. Run followed by the preposition means movement. So when you say I ran to the train station, to is a preposition. I ran and there was a movement in the direction of the train station. But I run a shop. Here, run is followed by a noun. And this means ownership. I run the shop means I own the shop. 29 is inversion. Inversion is where you change the order of words in a sentence to create emphasis in a certain way. And the first type is negative inversion. Look at the difference between the two sentences. I haven't been to Tokyo. Never have I been to Tokyo. They mean exactly the same. But in the second sentence, the negative word, never, goes at the beginning. And by putting the negative word at the beginning, emphasis is drawn to the fact it's a negative in a greater way. And this leads to a grammar change. We have the negative word never, and then the verb and subject switch order. I have becomes have I. Never have I been to Tokyo. There are a number of ways we can create negative inversion in English, and advanced English speakers need to know how to do it. Another way we do this is through cleft sentences. Cleft sentences, again, is where we introduce certain words at the beginning of a sentence and change the word order so that the things at the beginning are emphasised more. Look at the two sentences. I like the colour of this bag more than anything else. In the second sentence, though, what I like most about this bag is the colour. In the second sentence, the word what draws your attention to the words that come immediately afterwards. And here, most comes closer to the start than in the first sentence. Here, we emphasise more the fact that it's what I like most is the focus of this sentence. 28 is complex modal rules. Now, we're all familiar, once you reach an advanced level of English, with words such as could, or may, or might, must, have to, for various purposes. But then there are some complexities in how we use them. I'm just going to share one example with you here. One example is with logical deduction. For example, with present possibility, we could use could be, may be, or might be. They're late. Why? They could be stuck in traffic. They may be delayed on the trains. They might be ill. But there may also be present impossibility, where we logically deduce that something is very likely to be impossible. For this we use can't. They can't be still at work. The office closed 30 minutes ago. These two examples are in the present. What about the past? With past possibility, we can use could have, or may have, or might have. She could have changed her mind. She may have stopped for a drink. They might have stopped for a drink. If it's an impossibility, we would use could. He couldn't have walked. He would have been here by now. If it's not just possible, but likely that something is true, we can use must or have to. For example, they must be stuck in traffic. I heard there were long delays. They have to be on their way. She texted me to say she was leaving. Past likelihood uses must have. They must have left before 5 p.m. We don't use have to for past likelihood. But note here, if you are looking for the opposite of likelihood, don't use mustn't. We still have to use can't instead. 27. Complex passives. If you've reached an advanced level of English, you know about the passive form. It means switching the order of the subject and the object, and using the verb to be with the past participle. But there are some extra complexities and uses that advanced English speakers should know and should be using. One of them is obscuring information. Look at the transformation between the two sentences. I broke your favourite glass. Your favourite glass was broken. Notice in the second sentence, I has disappeared. And by I disappearing, we don't know who the subject is. And without the subject, we don't know who to blame. Your favourite glass was broken. Who by? We didn't say. So the passive can be used to obscure information. For example, to avoid blame for mistakes. There are also complexities with the passive when it comes to information order. Look at the different examples here. They ate eggs for breakfast. Transform it to the passive. Eggs were eaten for breakfast. The next two sentences have a slightly different change. They ate eggs from the local farm. Eggs from the local farm were eaten. Now notice in the first example, eggs and for breakfast separate. But in the second example, eggs from the local farm does not separate. And the reason here is if you're using an adverb phrase after the object, then you split it from the noun. So they ate eggs for breakfast. For breakfast is an adverb describing the whole sentence, the whole situation. It's an adverb phrase, so it doesn't have to stay with the eggs. But eggs from the local farm is a defining clause. From the local farm tells us qualities about the eggs. We know more about the eggs if we add from the local farm. It creates a noun phrase. And here we need to keep the two together, otherwise we lose that sense that the local farm is telling us more information about the eggs. 26 is pronunciation grammar. Sometimes the way that we pronounce words changes their meaning, and advanced English speakers need to know how to do this. Firstly, with verb or noun syllable stress changes. Compare the following. My friends have deserted me. My friends live in a desert. In the first example, it's a verb. My friends have deserted me, which means they have left me. In the second sentence, desert is a place. It's a noun. My friends live in a desert. So when you have a word which looks exactly the same in its verb form and the noun form, the way that we tell the difference grammatically in speech is where we put the stress. Now, quite often, not always, but usually in a verb, the stress goes on the second part of the word, particularly if it's a two-syllable word. With the noun, the stress goes usually, not always, but very often on the first syllable. A desert, noun, deserted, desert, which means to leave. There can also be changes in the way that we use intonation to distinguish between a question and a statement. I've underlined the sounds where the intonation drops afterwards. So the first one, you didn't say what you wanted. You didn't say what you wanted. And that drop on the final syllable indicates that it's a statement. Listen to the second one. You didn't say what you wanted. You didn't say what you wanted. The intonation goes up on the final syllable. And when the intonation goes up on the final syllable, it's indicating a form of question to the listener. 25 is clause reductors. There are some words in English that we can use to replace a clause if it's repeating what came before. For example, so. Look at the two sentences here. They're late. I told you they would be late. This means exactly the same as saying they're late. I told you so. And here, so is replacing a clause when it's repeating the same clause that we already knew about because of what was said before. Another word that does this is do. She followed instructions. He followed the instructions too. This means exactly the same as she followed instructions. He did too. And we can use do or did to replace part of a sentence or a clause when it's an activity that someone is involved with. Finally, that can replace a noun phrase or a reference to a whole situation. Look at the first one. Can you make the model? Yes, you can make the model. The second has exactly the same meaning. Can I make the model? Yes, you can make that. And here that simply replaces the model. There are also things we do when we are speaking to reduce our grammar. And the grammar of speaking is quite different to the grammar of writing. And it's important to know this to reach an expert level of English. Let's begin with an example of how a conversation might be written. Your car is nice. Yes, my car is very nice. Is it fast? No, it isn't very fast. That's how you'd write it, but in speaking, it would look more like this. Your car is nice. Yes, very nice. Is it fast? No, not very fast. So we often remove the subject and the verb if it's obvious from context or what was said before when we're speaking. By the way, if you want to take your learning further with lessons, speaking practice, exercises and progress tests on most of the features in this video, you could take my Perfect English Grammar course. There's a link in the description below. 24 is the causative. Look at the examples on the screen. My house was painted. I asked my friend to do it. This means more or less the same as I had my house painted by a friend. In the second example, we use the causative. It indicates that we got someone else to do something on our behalf. I had my house painted means I made sure someone else did it for me. 23. Adverbial phrases. Have a look at this sentence about the past. 100 years ago, there were no planes. There are a number of other ways, though, that we could express this adverbial phrase. Perhaps a long time ago, there were no planes. 100 years before now, there were no planes. Back in the old days, there were no planes. And what you need to know to reach an advanced level of English is a range of different possibilities for adverbial phrases, not just one-word phrases such as lately, recently. You need to know that adverbial phrases can be many words long, and there's different ways to do it. 22. Extending and reducing nouns. Let's start with extending. The mountain was cold. But which mountain? The highest mountain was cold. The highest Asian mountain was cold. Or perhaps we can switch Asia so it comes after mountain. The highest mountain in Asia was cold. Or even, the highest mountain that we can climb in Asia was cold. What's happened here is we've started with the noun mountain, but to give more information about what we mean by mountain, we've added words before and after the noun. Before the noun, we have words such as the, which is an article. We have highest, which is an adjective. Asian, also an adjective. Then after mountain, we can add a preposition phrase, such as in Asia, or a relative clause, that we can climb. And we can combine all of these different grammatical features together to create long noun phrases that tell us a lot about the noun. And advanced English speakers need to be able to do this. You need to be able to build a noun so it's large in a grammatically correct way. As well as extending nouns, we can also reduce them. Look at the example here. The present that I bought for you is in my bag. But we can also reduce it as follows. The present I bought for you is in my bag. Here we've lost the word that. Can we do this every time? No. But with certain rules you can. And here we can lose that because the subject at the start of the sentence is different to the subject in the relative clause. The subject of the whole sentence is the present. The subject of the relative clause is I. When they are different, you can often remove the relative pronoun that. Number 21 is something called fronting. I like Barcelona. This is no different to saying Barcelona is a place that I like. But there is a difference in meaning created by putting Barcelona at the beginning. By putting Barcelona at the beginning, we are making Barcelona the most important part of the sentence. In the first sentence, you could say that I like might be more important. We're focusing more on what I like because I is the subject. We're focusing on I. But by bringing Barcelona to the subject position, we now focus on Barcelona. Barcelona is a place that I like. So fronting involves getting the information you want to draw the I to the beginning, putting it in the subject position, and then you may have to change the grammar of the rest of the sentence to keep the meaning the same. Sometimes introducing the verb to be helps you to do this. 20 is nominalization. Look at the first sentence and then compare to the second sentence. The horses on the farm were very strong. The strength of the horses on the farm was considerable. In the first sentence we have strong, an adjective, But we can increase the complexity of the sentence by changing the adjective into a noun. The strength of the horses. Here we're creating a noun phrase. We make it longer, we make the information richer, the connections are more complex. The rest of the sentence has to change to fit in, so very becomes considerable. But nominalization is turning words into nouns to increase the complexity of your writing or speaking. 19 is mixed tense choices. We're not just talking about using the present tense or the past tense or the future tense here. At advanced levels of English, you need to understand that sometimes a tense that's meant for one time can actually be used for another time. For example, with the present. Here, I plan to finish in 5 minutes uses the present tense verb plan, but it actually means in the future, 5 minutes later. And we can often use the present simple with a time phrase to actually speak about the future. But we can also use the future to speak about the present. Look at the example here. They will keep playing loud music. It's annoying me. Now here we use will, which normally indicates the future, but we use it to indicate an annoying habit that goes on over and over again. Use of the word will draws the attention to the fact it is annoying someone. They will keep playing loud music. They play it over and over again. 18 is the grammar of politeness. Politeness in English has its own grammar. You can't just use any phrase you want and be polite. You have to follow certain rules. Let's go through the following. I'm going to give you 4 examples and they're on a line between being not polite at the top and more polite at the bottom. First of all, give me the menu. Then, I want the menu. I would like the menu. I would be grateful if you gave me the menu. The last one is much more polite than the first one, but why? The clue here is in something called distancing. Notice what happens to the verb in each of the examples as we go from top to bottom. In the first example, the verb comes at the beginning. Give me the menu. So the instruction comes as the first word that the listener hears. But as you go through each sentence, the verb moves further back in the sentence. So I want the menu. Here, want is the second word. I would like the menu. Would and like are the second and third verbs. And then I would be grateful if you gave me the menu. The instruction word gave is several words back. It's the 7th word in the sentence. So there's more distance between the instruction and the sentence that's spoken because the instruction comes later. And in general in English, the more words we add at the beginning of a sentence before giving the instruction, the more polite it is. There are other principles of politeness too, which are also to do with distancing. We can create distancing through time. In the first 2 examples, we have the present tense, give me the menu, I want the menu. But then we introduce the word would. Would is often used as the past of will. So in the third sentence, we introduce a sense of the past by using would. And then in the last sentence, gave, we've now put the main verb into the past as well. And this puts distance in time, because if you make the verb past, then the past is further away from now. If something is further away, more distance, it's less threatening, it gives the person more space when they're answering, and it makes it more polite. 17 is complex reporting. Compare the following. He claimed that he had seen a UFO. She denied seeing a UFO. They described the UFO in great detail. Here we have 3 different reporting verbs: claimed, denied, and described. But the grammar that goes after these verbs is different every time. He claimed that he had seen a UFO. So claim will often be followed by a clause introduced by that. She denied seeing a UFO. Here we have a verb with ing. In the third example, describe is followed by a noun phrase. We know that because it starts with the. So at an advanced level of English, you cannot simply report things using the same grammar each time. You have to know the correct grammar that follows the reporting verb that you use. 16 is complex questions. There are some things we can do with questions that are outside the grammatical norms. For example, echo questions. Normally, we would say this: what did they say? But we can use the same meaning in they said what? So here we use the intonation at the end of what by going up, they said what, to make it into a question. And the question word comes at the end. It's an echo question. We also have inverted questions. Normally we would say, what did you think of the lesson? In an inverted question, you would say, I wanted to know what you thought of the lesson. Here we turn the question into a sentence. We start with a subject and a verb, and the question element comes later. What you thought. We don't use the word did in the inverted question. It's also sometimes called an indirect question too. But we can make questions into statements, but they're still really questions. We still want an answer. 15 is adverb order. To speak advanced English, you need to know where adverbs can go in a sentence, and often is to do with the type of adverb you're using. For instance, I always eat enough, I am always on time. This is one of the more basic adverb word order features, where we know that an adverb of frequency, such as always, goes before most verbs. For example, I always eat, but after the verb to be, I am always. But there are other adverb rules or conventions that are less well known. For example, with adverbs of manner, you can use an adverb of manner to start or end a sentence, or you can put it after the verb. Adverbs of place, though, such as here or there, go after the verb. They don't start a sentence. You cannot start a sentence, there I left my hat. Adverbs of time generally start or end a sentence, but don't usually go in the verb position. They don't go after the verb. So there are various different rules, and there are more than these two, and you need to know them to be a competent advanced English speaker. 14. Same meaning, different grammar. I was so pleased to win. It was such a joy to win. Here, so and such have the same meaning. They're indicating a great amount, but they have different grammar. So is followed by the adjective please, but such is followed by the noun. And there are certain words which have the same meaning as each other, but they're used in different grammatical ways. Advanced learners need to know about this. 13 is prefix choices. Let's start with the word present, which means to be there. Represent, though, means to be there for someone else. Misrepresent is to be there for someone else in the wrong way. And here, re and miss are prefixes. They add an element of extra meaning to the original word. Re, in someone's place. Miss, the wrong way. And some of the most common prefixes that we use are auto, which means your own, such as autobiography, means a story about yourself that you wrote. Extra means outside of. So extracurricular means activities that are beyond the curriculum. Down means reduce, such as downplay means to reduce the emphasis on something. Over means too much. Overdone means it was done too much. We can say that with food. The food was overdone. They did it too much. It was overcooked. It was cooked too much. Out means beyond expected. Outplayed in a sport means they played beyond the expectations, more than someone else. Pre means before, so preliminary means the first of something. Preview means you view it before others. And then re can mean again or instead of. 12 is hypotheticals. Now, there are hypotheticals that we learn at a more basic level, such as conditional forms, but then there are other principles of hypotheticals that go through other areas of grammar. Let's start with a typical example. I don't own a pot of gold. I wish I owned a pot of gold. The first sentence is the true sentence, I don't own a pot of gold. The second sentence is the hypothetical, the unreal sentence. And here we have a shift backwards in time to make the statement unreal. I wish I owned. So the past simple here shows it's hypothetical, it's unreal. But there are other ways we can do this too. For example, had I found a pot of gold, I would have left my job. So here we change the word order so that the auxiliary verb goes first. We can use other verbs too by shifting them back into the past. I can swim. I could swim if I tried. So here could is the past of can, and that indicates that it's not a real situation we're talking about. It's hypothetical. Other changes are to typical verb rules for I with the verb to be. I was, for example, can become I were. So I am poor. If we make this hypothetical, I could say, I wish I were rich. Or were I rich, I could leave my job. 11 is blended grammar words. For example, the word albeit. Albeit is formed from all, be, and it. And the meaning contains all three words. Even considering all, it is like this, is reflecting be. Look at the example. They arrived, albeit rather tired. Even considering all, the situation was that they were rather tired. And in English, we have lots of longer grammatical words, which are a combination of individual grammatical words. And good complex English involves using these words in a correct way. Here are some more examples. Nonetheless, which means this does not make what is coming less. The path was difficult, nonetheless, they continued. Whatsoever. No matter whatever happens, nothing whatsoever will stop our journey. Furthermore. This really means I'm going further with more. They continued. Furthermore, they repeated the trip the next day. Number 10 is fillers. Fillers are to do with speaking, but if you don't know what they mean, you will be confused by them. For instance, the answer is, like, the easiest thing ever. Now, you may think that like should mean the same as, or maybe even enjoy. But here it is a speaking filler, and it simply emphasises what comes next. It's drawing more attention to the fact that it's the easiest thing ever. Similarly, he made a right mess of that. And here, right does not mean correct, but is another speaking filler of emphasis. 9 is geographical articles. Have a look at the following and look at how the use of articles, a and the or zero article, is different. But why? Wembley Stadium, the Nelson Mandela Stadium. I travelled on a bus. She travelled by bus. Let's go to the shops. Let's go to town. These are just some of the complexities when it comes to using articles with geography. The first two sentences are described by the first two rules. Buildings starting with the place often have no article. So Wembley is a town within the area of London. And because it's a town, we don't use the article. It's not the Wembley Stadium, it's Wembley Stadium. But Nelson Mandela is a person. With people, not towns, we often use the article, the Mandela Stadium. With the second pair of sentences, we have on a bus, but by bus. And here we use articles with transport, except after by. With the last two sentences, let's go to the shops, let's go to town. Usually you would use an article before a place. But some very common places have no article. For example, town or church or school. There is a convention in English where we don't put the article before them unless we are referring to one specific example of that article. But there are many, many more rules to do with geographical articles that advanced speakers of English need to know. 8 is lities. What are lities? Look at the first example here and then look at the explanation after. Although she doesn't get the top grades, she isn't the worst student. Notice here there is a double negative. She isn't the worst. Isn't and worst, they're both negative in meaning. But if you use a double negative, we're actually indicating a weak positive. In this example, she is an average or better than average student. Number 7 is phrasal verbs. There are around 5,000 phrasal verbs in English, and many of them are commonly used. You need to know them one by one, but advanced English speakers also need to know some certain principles about them. To begin with, a phrasal verb is made of a verb and a particle. For example, leave is a one-word verb, but the phrasal verb could be get off. For example, they got off the ride. And phrasal verbs can even have two different particles. However, it's important to know that phrasal verbs are more informal than one-word verbs. For example, leave is more formal than get off. So an advanced speaker of English needs to know the context that they are speaking in or writing in. If you're trying to be more formal, business-like, academic-like, professional, or with someone you don't know in writing in particular, don't use so many phrasal verbs. Stick to the one-word verbs. Also, phrasal verbs can either be separable or inseparable. For example here, get him off the stage. The next act is ready. Here, get off is separable. That means that they can be separated, particularly when you have a personal pronoun. Personal pronouns usually go between separable phrasal verbs. 6 is group nouns. Group nouns are words which describe a whole range of related nouns. And to speak in good, advanced, complex English, you need to know a range of group nouns that can describe other nouns in a kind of a synonym type way. Because if you're able to replace words in different ways but keep the same meaning, then you increase the level of what you're saying or writing. A couple of small examples here. A number of sheep were in the field. This flock was completely white. So if you have many sheep together, it's called a flock. Or the museum was a home to paintings from Europe and artwork from the US. This collection was extremely valuable. So different pieces of art, when they're put together, are often called a collection. 5 is collocations. Collocations are words that usually go together. For example, developer strategy is a collocation, but doer strategy is not a collocation. So developer strategy is a collocation because they are words that are usually used together. Now, some words that go together, such as do and strategy, may be both grammatically and semantically acceptable, but they do not collocate, so we don't use them in English. And this is where advanced speakers need to know that you can't just put any words together and sound native. You need to know the words that collocate together in order to sound native. And these all need to be learnt individually. 4 is grammatical symmetry. In this first example, there is grammatical symmetry. For lunch, I had rice, carrots and beans. This list has grammatical symmetry because it is noun, noun, noun. Rice, carrots, beans. Noun followed by noun followed by noun. And when we make lists in English, the most complex advanced English will try to achieve grammatical symmetry, where we have similar grammar in each part of the list. The next list also has grammatical symmetry. This morning I ate breakfast, left home and went to work. Verb noun, verb noun, verb noun. But the final one does not have grammatical symmetry. For lunch I had rice, carrots and I added some beans. Here we have noun, noun and clause. Although grammatically it's not technically incorrect, it's less coherent and cohesive because we haven't followed the principles of grammatical symmetry. Number 3 is onomatopeia. Onomatopeia. Can you say it? It's a hard word to say. But what does it mean? Onomatopeia is like this. The bicycle crashed into the bins. Now, what does the sound of crash make you think of? Well, the word crashed sounds like the actual event. When there is a crash, it has that kind of sound. And onomatopeia is when you use words that have a sound that have the similar sound to the meaning. And particularly when we're storytelling, effective storytelling or songs or poems will use this feature of English. Other examples are such as, there was a boom when the fireworks show began. Boom has the sound similar to the explosion that a firework makes. Or the buzzing of bees filled the air. Buzz has a similar sound to the sound that bees make. Number 2 is perhaps one of the hardest features of English to learn and takes even an advanced learner a long time because there are so many idioms in English and they all can have different grammatical constructions. Here's an example of an idiom now. I killed 2 birds with 1 stone by typing a message while I was on a call. The idiom here is killed 2 birds with 1 stone. And this means to do 2 things at the same time. I typed the message, I was on a call. I killed 2 birds with 1 stone. I did the 2 things at the same time. But you would never have known that by going to a dictionary and looking at the meaning of kill 2 birds with 1 stone by looking at each element of grammar and vocabulary individually. You needed to know them as a phrase. And idioms are groups of words which make a new meaning when put together. So if you want to reach that C2 level of English, you need to expand your knowledge of idioms. And that brings us to my number 1 feature of an advanced English speaker. And this is called verbing. I have chosen verbing for my number 1 because it demonstrates that learning English is not something that you just do once. English changes And learning English 20 years ago in 2004 doesn't mean you know the same English that there is in 2024. Let me explain. In 2004, we all said, use Google to find the answer, or send them a message. But in 2024, we say this, I don't know the answer. Shall we Google it? Or have you messaged them? When nouns come into common use and they represent an activity, sometimes people start using them as verbs. So that's what's happened. Google became such a common activity that people started using it as a verb. Messages became so common that people started using it as a verb because there was an activity involved. That makes me think, what will be next? Now, AI has been very popular in the last 1 or 2 years, and it's only likely to grow even more. So I wonder if AI is going to become the next verb, the next example of verbing, where a noun converts into a verb because it's commonly used as an activity. It doesn't quite sound right though, does it? Have you AI'd the answer? I think it will happen, but it may take some time.